Hello, my dear Pythonistas. Let's say you're writing Python code and people tell you that it doesn't look like Python. Has it ever happened to you? There are special constructs in Python which make you look like a real Pythonista. Just like how English language has its own beauty, like idioms and phrases, Python also has its own idioms. Let's take a look at few of them. Here I have a function which is flower, and you're going to pass a flower string to it, and it's going to check whether it's a flower or not and return a response. Now let's run this python example.py. So here it has returned true and false. Now if you look at this function, it doesn't look so great. It doesn't look very Pythonic. What do I mean by that? I'm going to show you two more variations. One is, instead of writing separate Python functions, you can use them all with R. Or even more elegant way, instead of doing this or, and or, we can put it all in a list and then check whether this string is in that list and return true. Either ways, it's still not elegant. We can make it even more beautiful. This check is actually returning you a Boolean value. So instead of doing an if check, you can directly return whether it's true or false. And here it's the same idea. So now instead of writing a well-winded long function, we have just made it into a single line. I would still suggest you to go with this because you can keep adding more flowers to it without disrupting the flow of the code. Here you have to write a whole conditional again. Now let's check this. It still gives you true and false. So yes, instead of writing long-winded functions, and especially when you're returning Booleans directly in its raw form, look at the previous expression and return it right away. So that's about Booleans. Let's go through this next example. Here you have a list, something that looks like this, which is a bunch of elements, and the goal is to go through that list and print its item and the position. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 followed by the item. So you have to print it like this. Now, I've seen many new Pythonistas do this. What they do is, first, they get the length of the n equal to length of the list, and then they loop over this using the range. In range, you get 0 to n, and you use that to put it in the print. There is a more elegant way, of course, to do this. Again, you have the L list, and instead of doing that, for I, comma, the element E, in enumerate of. So this enumerate, what it does, it takes this list and its index and then zips them together into an index and the object. So let's print this index comma element. This will work exactly like the previous for loop. So let's clear things and run it again. Now you can see it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And of course, this is a much more elegant way because you're not getting the length separately, you're not ranging over it. All you're doing is just enumerating. To give you a better understanding of enumerate, even though this is not an enumerate class, print of E. So I'm not going to expand it. I'm going to keep it like that. See what enumerate returns. It just returns pairs of index and the elements. So that is your enumeration. Next time you have to loop through a list and you also need the index, never do this, go for enumerate. The next item that we're going to look at is you have a list and you want to combine them into a string. What I see people do is they create an empty string and then they loop over this list and then keep indenting that string with that item in the list. And whatever the separator, here I'm separating it by space, so I have added that as well. So let's print this. There is nothing wrong with that. You get the output, but it's not very Pythonic. So what is a very Pythonic way to do it? And this is where Python gives you its magic. There is a method called join with string. So you can use a string as a joining, concatenating element, and you can pass it a list. What it will do is exactly what this for loop is doing, but in a more elegant way. It will loop through the list and use this as a separator. Let's print this whole thing. See, a new message split in base, but all we did is not write a for loop, but just use a Python construct. This is what I'm trying to emphasize. Python has so many magic methods built into it, and all we have to do is know it to use it. So this is the overall idea of writing idiomatic Python code, writing beautiful Python code that looks like real Pythonistas. Know your built-ins. There is something called as built-ins in Python, and you have to know them. Know what exists there. And also know the methods of default data structures, like lists, strings, integers. What does it provide? So how to do that? So let's open a Python console. In Python, there is something already built in called built-ins. And if you do a dir on built-ins, you will see most of the methods that you're familiar with. Here you can see type, you can see zip, sum, str, open. So there are like so many methods. Just go through them once and see what they do, so that next time you're stuck at something, maybe this method will come to your mind. The next thing I was talking about is the methods that each data structure provides. For example, let's do a dir on str object. And here you can see all the methods that it supports. Upper, is it a title, whether you want to join it, if you want to strip it, or if you want to swap the case, you want to translate it, you want to replace it. All of these methods are available. Next time you don't have to go through this nitty-gritty way of writing Python like C, and you can write code like a real Pythonista.